Steve and Rich, we'll get you set up here in a second. Plop down, have a seat. Thank you for coming out on a Saturday morning. I've had this nasty head cold for about 2 or 3 weeks now, and again, I'm losing, every few days I lose my voice. So is it the cherry blossoms? And I was up all night last night, hacking away, coughing. So I'm gonna have to use this mic because I don't want to kill my voice. So give me a second and let me put this on. I really do appreciate everybody coming out on a Saturday morning when there's lots that you can be doing. Let me see if I got this. Hello? Hello? Hey. That's a little too much, Joe Walsh. I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to take my coat off. I'm going to put this right here. Don't you take this coat. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Hoffman Estates. I will get into what we're going to talk about for the next 5.5 hours in a second. But what I'd like, we're not going to be here for 5.5 hours. But what I'd like to do first is begin, as we always begin any town hall, with the pledge. If you can stand, please do, and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to do something a little different this morning, as is evidenced by maybe the phone call you got from me, those annoying robocalls, or however else you learned about the town hall. I'd like to do our best to try to focus on a topic. Yesterday, I think, was the 2-year anniversary of the signing of the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare. It was probably the biggest issue, no matter where you stand on the issue, in 2010. You know me, I'm just going to show my bias. For the sake of this country, it had better be the biggest issue in 2012. And that's what I want to get into today. So we're going to try to devote the next hour, hour and a half to a topic: healthcare, Obamacare, Medicare, and anything closely related. As always, at our town halls, at my town halls, you know that we're very informal. I'm going to have a couple experts with me today, a physician and a private insurance guru. Hopefully we may have sprinkled throughout the audience other folks who have a stake in this healthcare thing. Some of you have heard me say this before. I made about 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 pledges when I got elected, and I'm holding to every one. One of the pledges I made was that I did not want there to be a member of Congress anywhere in the country that held more town halls than I do. I want to be the most accessible member of Congress. I think we're doing pretty well at that. What interests me, though, I do that for a lot of reasons. I do that because outside of how I vote every week, I think it's the most important thing I do. I ran against a woman last time who never wanted to get in front of her constituents. It's not just Democrats. Let's be honest. Most Republicans and Democrats don't like to do this as much as I do. Look, I'm being filmed right now by my opposition. Hi, Tammy Duckworth. Every word I say like this is being filmed. And so Tammy Duckworth's team is going to tape it back, and they're going to slice and pick and try to find any, crazy thing that Joe Walsh can say. And that scares a lot of politicians, because Lord knows I'm out there a lot. There are a lot of YouTube videos of me out there. And most politicians are frightened to death of that. I don't care. I love this country. We're going through a time right now. I'm scared to death with where this country is. So I'm going to put myself out there a lot. And if that means Tammy Duckworth gets to look at a lot of film of Joe Walsh, so be it. We go out of our way to invite everybody to our town halls. I don't want to just hear from conservatives. I don't want to just hear from people who watch Fox News. That would bore the you-know-what out of me. I'm on TV a lot. I tend to go on MSNBC and CNN and ABC a lot more than I go on Fox. So because we do this, and we open this up to everybody, people who maybe love Joe Walsh and people who want to throw me you-know-where, there's only one rule I've got at my town halls, and if you can't live by this rule, I'm going to respectfully ask you to leave. You've got to respect every opinion in this room, period. Liberal, conservative, me, you. This is a free-flowing debate for the next hour about an important subject. And whether you want to repeal Obamacare tomorrow or you want universal government-run health care, respect every opinion. If we don't, these things don't work. Trust me. We've done about 150 of them. They don't work if we don't respect each other. That's my only rule. I used to have another rule, but we all abused it. It was don't filibuster. Don't go on too long. But politicians always go on too long. I'm going to be sipping and chugging. I've got water and I've got hot tea. So I'm going to be interrupting myself a lot. The second thing we do at the beginning of our town halls is this, before we get into our topic. Look, I've been in Washington about 1.5 years, and I feel bloody, battered, and bruised because it seems like we've just been fighting for 1.5 years. And I'm glad we've been fighting because we're fighting over important things. But it's always helpful to remind ourselves, Republican and Democrat, conservative and liberal, we all, though we disagree on a lot of things, we all love this country. This is the greatest country in the history of the planet. It's why we say the pledge, because we acknowledge the idea this country was founded upon. Freedom! Nothing more complicated than that. The second thing we do is honor men and women who have served and died and remained to defend that flag and that idea. If you've worn the uniform of this country, if you've served this country, either raise your hand or stand up and be recognized. Thank you. 2 years ago, the President of the United States signed into law what I believe, no matter where you stand on it, one of the biggest pieces of legislation in our country's history. It will determine the fate of this country, whether we repeal it, come on in folks, or whether we keep it and expand it. 2 years ago. 2 years later, as we sit here in Hoffman Estates, on what we still can call an unseasonably warm day for this time of year, 2 years later, what have we learned about what the President signed into law? A few things come off the top of my head. Americans, and the polling is clear about this, Americans today like it even less than they liked it 2 years ago. And when we signed Obamacare into law, and by the way, folks, I'm going to, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to call it Obamacare. If I offend anybody, I apologize. I'm not being cute. I'm not being sly. I'm listening to my president. When my president advocated for this law, and when my president signed this bill into law, he said it was the greatest, most profound piece of healthcare legislation since Medicare. If you believe that, gosh, if I'd done that, I'd want it to be called Walsh Care. He should be so darn proud of it. he should want it to be called Obamacare. Yeah. And so whether you like what it is or don't like it, I don't mean to be offensive. It's also a lot harder to say the affordable health care, blah, blah, blah. So let's, for all of us, call it what you want. But that's what I'm going to do, and I do not mean to insult. We know the American people like it less and less every week for the past 2 years. Polling tells us that. We know that yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of the signing of the bill, and the president didn't say peep about it, poop about it, didn't say a thing about it. Find that most curious. What else have we learned in 2 years? We know now, and the CBO reminded us of this a week ago, that it's going to cost a lot more than what they told us. Surprise, surprise. This isn't just Democrats. Every time somebody in government passes a big bill, what typically happens? It ends up costing a heck of a lot more than they tell us it's going to cost. Same thing happened with Obamacare, except it happened with a huge number. CBO, Obama told us it would cost $800 to $900 billion over 10 years. Hooey. They knew at the time it wouldn't cost that. Everybody knew it. CBO comes out last week and says, oops, no, going to cost about $1.76 trillion over 10 years. Now, knowing what we know of politicians and government, raise your hand if you believe that's going to be the true cost over the next 10 years. We got a couple people. Good. Raise your hand if we're going to learn in another couple of years that it's going to be greater than 1.76 trillion. We know, because surveys tell us this conclusively, small business in this country, which again, Republicans and Democrats agree, small businesses in this country typically are responsible for 60 to 70% of all hiring that goes on in the country. The principal reason they tell us they're not hiring is because of this healthcare legislation. That's not me saying that. That's what they tell us. Now, they go on and on about a lot of government regulations. I'm sick of government red tape. I'm scared to death with what Washington's doing. But they always come back to Obamacare. And what they say is so beautifully poignant, I wish politicians would listen to them. Because I've heard this over and over. Virtually every businessman tells me, how in God's name am I supposed to know what Obamacare is going to cost my business next year, 2 years down the road, or 10 years down the road, when the people who passed the bill don't know how much it's going to cost? So you're a smart businessman or woman, what are you going to do? You're going to wait. And generally, right now, the business community in this country is sitting on their hands. Not hiring, not growing. They're basically, remember when your kids were little and they were bad, you'd call a timeout and you'd go put them in the corner of the room. Business has called a timeout. They're scared to death with what's coming out of Washington. The biggest piece of what they're scared about, they tell us, is Obamacare. We were told, the president told us, that don't worry about all that. It won't cost that much. And the other thing the president told us was, if you like the health care you got, what did he tell us? You'll be able to keep it. Don't worry, you'll be able to keep it if you like what you got. Well, again, surprise, surprise, that's not true. The CBO told us again last week that over the course of the next 10 years, upwards of 20 million people who have health insurance will be taken off of those plans, whether they like it or not. Unfortunately,